Now streaming on YouTube.
Preparing to live stream the webinar.
Yep. I think we're good to go.
I should shoot out like a
Yeah.
get a YouTube link.
Yep. It just like automatically goes to whoever's talking. Is that correct?
Yeah, the screen will change.
Okay.
You can do a gallery view. You see that at the top, that option? You want to change?
You want to do that?
Yeah, you want to change your display name again. It's just yeah.
Oh yeah, change the display name. Fuck.
All right, it's streaming live. We're live.
We got a link to send out.
Yeah, let's
I'll
blast
DM
it.
it to you guys. Everyone be on their best behavior.
Hopefully you already did all your drugs.
Uppers, downers, zingers,
How do I
zangers.
change my display name again?
Go to participants.
Participants, that's right.
Zingers,
How do I
zangers.
change my display name again?
Go to participants.
Participants, that's right.
Is that on my end?
Nah, it's on mine. I was trying to send out this link and it sent me to it.
Gotcha. Yeah, there's like a 20-second delay.
Okay.
On my end.
We just grabbed the YouTube link up top, right?
Yeah, I can DM it to you, Evan.
I think I got it. I mean, right?
All right. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Oh, should we do that gallery view?
Yeah, I
Yeah.
think it's just for your personal thing, but maybe not.
Oh, okay. 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 I mean, you want to like introduce us, Drew, and all that?
Yeah. If anyone's tuning in, and I guess this will be recorded as well. This is our NFL draft props Zoom that we're streaming live on YouTube, and hopefully there will be a recording of it. My name is Drew Silva. I write about baseball for Roto World. I know like next to nothing about football at this point. My team was the St. Louis Rams, and they got taken away from me. So I haven't really followed it. But Evan is my brother. He knows a thing or two about football. We have Joey Knish, a big name in the gambling community. Scott Smith, who's like an expert mock drafter. So I'm going to kind of represent like the casual idiot bettor who's looking at for anything to bet on, and like NFL draft props right now are the only thing to bet on unless you're betting esports or something like that. So I have a site that I go through. People go through Bovada. There's going to be different ranges of odds for a lot of these props, but we're just going to kind of chat. This is supposed to be pretty casual. Don't take it too seriously, but hopefully there'll be some good information to come out of it. I don't know. Is that a good intro?
I liked it. No,
solid.
that works.
So I guess number one, the first, I have to hang on. I have to pull up my Google Doc.
No, it's all good because we probably got people filling in right now. So
Yeah,
that's
right.
what we just got the link out there on Twitter. So it'll probably take a couple minutes for.
So just, I don't know. Let's shoot are we allowed to cuss on this?
What'd you guys do today? I mean, I just argued with Falcons fans all day about because I gave them Henry Ruggs in my mock, and they think the Falcons can only take defense, and so they're they want like an inferior player just because he plays defense.
It's kind of like Eagles fans. Like you're going to get kicked back if you don't give them a wide receiver.
Right. Yeah.
I bet on esports. You mentioned people that have nothing to do but bet on esports. Today I was betting on esports. So that fit the mold. That's holding me over for right now.
What do you bet on? Like NBA 2 or like League of Legends or?
It's a common like It's weird because the Sims is like new, like the sports Sims is kind of like new on the scene. Esports, actual like League of Legends, Dota 2, and all that's been around for a minute. It's just not that popular on the mainstream, unless you're into it, especially on the gambling mainstream. So that's been around a minute. It's now they're trying to kind of get it out there a little bit more. But the Sims is kind of what's hot right now. Is that's like a new angle everybody's getting into, and
Like
I think
the game,
like literally the computer simulations plays each other. Yeah.
Okay, I got you. I thought you meant like the game, The Sims.
No, not like build your own town.
Yeah, like
no,
where
like
you like simulate
Sims
real
as
life.
in like like 2K and Madden and that.
I got you.
Yeah, that sounds awful, Joey.
I mean, it's not it's not a glamorous living. I'll be honest with you. No, it's not as great as the real stuff.
And then we got Scott Smith from Roto World. He's
not from
drafting than me, only a little bit though, but he's better than me. And we got a chance to hang out in Chicago. Like, when was that? Was that like last summer or something?
Yeah, it was like last summer, and just a quick little story. The night ended with a police officer giving me the option to get in a car with blue lights or get in a car which was basically a taxi cab. And I got back to the hotel after doing some power drinking with Evan Silva. And let's just say my wife was not too happy the next morning as I stumbled my ass through the airport and she carried every bit of luggage we had.
Oh, no. Oh, no.
Flying hungover is like the worst thing in the world.
It's the worst. I mean, oh, man.
All right.
I lost my phone that night. Like, it was one of those nights, you know.
That's fun stuff.
Yeah.
We're up to almost 100 live viewers. Should we get into some questions, or you want?
Nice.
Yeah. Let's fire it up then.
So, I guess we should start with quarterbacks. And I got Tua Tagovailoa, third quarterback drafted at plus 400 like 2 weeks ago. I think it's actually not as good as it's come down from that. Let me look at what it is right now.
No, it's down significantly. Depending on where you're at, that's going to be like, in a lot of places, it's not even plus money anymore. So I think it's basically a coin flip in a lot of the markets, second quarterback and third quarterback between Tua and Herbert. So if you jumped on that early, like you said there, now's a good time. If you don't think Jordan Love kind of makes a surprise move, which I don't, where if you got in early, you can kind of arb off and take a piece of the opposite side if you want, or you let it go. I got in at, I got like Herbert, second quarterback, and Tua, third quarterback, like plus 400, plus 600, like you're saying a couple of weeks ago. I'm just letting it fly. I think that's the way it plays out. I don't arb as much. I'm not in my younger days, I used to, when I was a little tighter, I used to arb and hedge and do a lot of that stuff. To me, I think that's the right position. So I'm just rolling with it now.
What do you think, Evan? So yeah, I mean, obviously it would be Herbert going second. The idea would be Tua would be the third quarterback off the board.
Yeah, I agree with that. I mean, there's just been, I mean, I believe the fact that the teams are really concerned about his health. In Bob McGinn's draft preview write-up regarding quarterbacks, he pulled 18 NFL executives. I don't think that this is like everyone says, oh, that's a smoke screen. Oh, this isn't a smoke screen. Like this is, he pulls them anonymously. They're not, out here saying things to, try to create propaganda. That's why it's good to have anonymous sources is because you can get the truth from anonymous sources because, they're not going to get in trouble for giving their honest answers. And, he pulled 18 league executives and scouts and averaged on a scale of 1 to, and asked them to say on a scale of 1 to 10, how concerned were they? And on average, they were concerned at a level of 7.6, which, I mean, that's a high level of concern. In Gil Brandt's top 150, Tua was behind Herbert. I think Daniel Jeremiah has hinted strongly. He's kind of wavered. He did a recent mock draft and he had Tua going 5 to the Dolphins, but at times he has predicted Herbert to go ahead of Tua. And these are the guys that really, I mean, I know for sure that 2 teams offered Daniel Jeremiah to be their GM not too long ago. I mean, he's super plugged in. He is the the color analyst for the Chargers. He's like, everybody loves Daniel Jeremiah in and outside the league. And he's has a ton of information. And Gil Brandt, of course, former Cowboys GM, he's super plugged in too. So, and Bob McGinn is, one of the greatest football writers probably of all time. So these are guys that I definitely trust. They've been accurate in the past. And I think that Tua to the Jaguars, which I've seen at like 20-1, is really, really interesting. Mike Lombardi, another guy who, worked in the league for a really long time and worked for Al Davis and worked for, Bill Walsh and Bill Belichick. I mean, the people that he has worked under is just, an encyclopedia. And he has talked about how the Jaguars owner is not pleased with their quarterback situation. He's shown a lot of loyalty to their GM, Dave Caldwell, like the Teflon GM. He's done everything in the book to get fired, and he's freaking still there as the Jaguars GM, and they still don't have a quarterback. And, they passed on Deshaun Watson. They passed on Patrick Mahomes. They took Taven Bryan over Lamar Jackson. That looks really, really bad from a couple years ago. And that he's just frustrated. And, maybe it's time that, the owner starts to meddle a little bit and be like, hey, let's go get Tua. Let's really try to solve this thing.
Now, what do you think? We've kind of all, I believe I saw in Scotty's mock, you just said it, we've kind of all on the same page that we believe the Finns are leaning towards Herbert, whether they trade up to 3 or whether they take him at 5. Chargers, known liar to the media, absolutely always, sends out a bunch of BS. There's nothing that ever comes out of the Chargers org that you can believe. Where do you think they're going at 6? Because that's to me, I don't know. I didn't really place the bet. To me, if he's going to go before the Jags at 9 as a potential, it would be the Chargers scoop him at 6. But I never get a read on exactly kind of where they're leaning or what they're going to do.
Let's throw this one to Scott, because I know that you just came out with a new recent mock draft.
Yeah, when you start looking at Tua, there's more concern than just the injuries. You've heard about Steve Sarkisian trying to integrate a little bit more of a pro style system there last year at Alabama, and that Tua just didn't take to it. He's run that RPO system since he was basically in 6th grade is what I've read a lot of. And I think the only wild card you have as far as Tua being drafted there, maybe before 9, is if we see San Diego take it, whether or not they move up to 3, which I don't see that happening just with all the medical information like that's come out, and where there's smoke, there's fire there with Tua, and then some of the other issues as well. Evan kind of hit on some of the moves that the Chargers made with Brian Bulaga. He's more of a right tackle. You start looking at Tua and being a left-handed quarterback. There are some signals there from the Chargers saying that they could line up to take them. Here in my latest mock draft, I do have them dropping, to the Jaguars just to kind of get a different look. He kind of reminds me a bit of Mark Brunell. And the Jaguars really hadn't had a good quarterback or even hope at quarterback since Mark Brunell. So right now I have San Diego currently taking Isaiah Simmons, who's pretty much a freak athlete. I know a lot of coaches, especially defensive coaches, are kind of wavering, and San Diego needs, some linebacker help a little bit. And, last year they really struggled. They were 31st with 28 sacks in the league. And I think especially in that division there that you have, and he has to deal with Travis Kelce and Darren Waller, I think if you sit there and look at Isaiah Simmons, I think he makes sense to be able to match up with some of the players in that division, and I can definitely see Tua going ahead and sliding past San Diego right now.
That's some good analysis right there, bro.
Let's play it out though. Let's say he gets past the Chargers. Let's say he gets past the Jags now, because now you're in the range of when you start looking anywhere on these sites as far as the prices. If he gets past those 2 teams, you're talking about, Patriots 20-1, Saints 30. I mean, really big money line prices on a team that, like anybody that's basically past 9. If it's not going to be the Jags or the Chargers, and he starts to get outside of the top 10, who's moving on? And this is what I took a little sprinkle of the Raiders. There might be a team like whether it be the Saints or the Pats that could trade up and make a move. I kind of, what do you guys think as far as a team maybe, past 15 that could either make a trade up for him or how far does he slide?
Man,
Well, that's
I'd
the
have to
thing,
think
like-
that I'd have to think that John Gruden's sitting in his house somewhere with a sweatpant boner, waiting to go ahead and throw the card up at Tua. I mean, so my guess would be right there with the Raiders. It's gonna have to be somewhere in that mix right there.
Well, and that's the thing with like the longer shot teams like the Jaguars and the Raiders, like bet them both, you know?
Yep.
Like take a shot on both of them. And if you hit, I mean, you're going to be deep into the green,
I
right?
see that Tua's draft position over under is 4.5, but if you want to take the over 4.5, so that would be after pick 5. That's minus 260, and to get the under, it's plus 175. Herbert's is 5.5, which is interesting, I think. So I like that bet. Tua as the third drafted quarterback. I also like I said at the intro, I know nothing about football, but it feels to me like a team would be more likely to trade up to get Tua than they would for Herbert. Like they would fall in love with that talent and that upside. But I don't know what the hell I'm talking about. Some other interesting
No,
draft.
that's what everyone thinks. And I think that that's a logical way to think. But I think that there's just a lot of belief that the dude Tua is brittle. Like teams think he's brittle. He's only 6 foot 217. He also only scored 13 on the Wonderlic. I don't care about that, but executives in the league might, like, definitely. I mean, there are definitely people in the league that care about that.
Some other over/under draft positions just before we move on from quarterback. Jake Fromm is at 60.5. Jordan Love's at 19.5. Jalen Hurts is at 62.5. Those would round out the top quarterbacks in this draft, I guess.
I loaded up. Love originally was around 13. I put it at 13.5 over, 15.5 over, 17.5 over. I don't see, unless you guys have differing opinions here, I don't see a scenario unless there's a trade up where he goes before the 20s. I just don't. I would still, there's some 19.5s out there at pretty decent juice, minus 110, minus 120. I would still play that smaller. I'm just not seeing a team until you get into the 20s. And I wouldn't be surprised if this is a Drew Lock-esque, he falls to the second round. Because you've got a lot of teams on the back end of the 20s there that are looking to compete. They want win now. They don't want a guy, to stash for a year unless you're maybe the Saints, because you'd expect Breeze to retire after this year. But even then, I don't know if anybody's going to move up for him, because who are you trying to get past that's going to take him? So to me, I would say the earliest I see him is high 20s. So I would be comfortable. I'm already loaded up on Love overs, but I'd still be comfortable taking a piece of 19.5.
Here's a good question from our YouTube chat from Jason Rettinger. Thoughts on over 4.5 quarterbacks in the first round? It's at plus 450.
This is a good one.
So over 4.5 quarterbacks taken in the first round at plus 450.
I don't think you can do it though. I mean, I think as few as 3 quarterbacks could go. I'm with Joey that I think that Love could fall out of the first round. I love that comparison of Drew Lock. Who was it last year that he was connected to in the first round? He was connected to some team really strongly last year. Was it the Packers? It might have been the Packers, actually.
Yep. Packers.
I think
he had some Broncos love early when people thought, that he was going to go with the first Broncos pick instead of the, coming back around in the second hand. So sometimes the quarterback steam gets a little up there in the media. That's not exactly how it's going to play out.
The thing is, there is a minefield from 19 to 30 where Jordan Love, of teams that could take a quarterback. And it starts at 19 with the Raiders, 20 the Jags, 23 the Patriots, 24 the Saints, 30 the Packers. Even the Dolphins, let's say they, maybe there's been some buzz of them taking a left tackle at 5. Maybe they don't want any of the quarterbacks at 18. Maybe they take Love at 26, but I'm with you though. I think that he's at real risk still of falling into the second round. And I don't know. He's a tough guy to gauge right now. I think the comparison to what happened with Drew Lock is an apt one.
Steve Boynton on YouTube says he got under 4 quarterbacks in the first round at plus 110. So maybe if that's still out there,
Yeah, no, I think because 4 is probably what, unless somebody reaches up for, Jalen Hurts has got a lot of recent buzz, but I still think first round would be quite aggressive for him. The only thing that makes the case is kind of what happened with Lamar Jackson. Of if you get a guy at the end of the first, he has that 5th-year option. So if you want to take a quarterback, there has been scenarios in recent drafts where somebody, trades up to the very end of the first round. If they were going to take them, if they have an early second round pick, they'll jump to the end of round 1 to take the quarterback that's still hanging out there because they get him on a 5th-year option that's going to be cheap. So that's a little bit to look for, so I wouldn't be, I think the right number is probably 4. 5 would be surprising. It's depending on what kind of price you're going to get. But for me, that market's kind of baked into right where it should be because, 4 up or down even G is probably what it is. But I think 3 is likelier than 5, if that makes sense.
Yeah, and I think one of the other things that fans really need to take into account right now is you've got Cam Newton and Jameis Winston sitting out there right now that aren't going to cost any draft picks right now. So when you're factoring this into your bet, whether or not you're going to go ahead and take that prop, you have to think of these other quarterbacks that are still sitting out there. And Andy Dalton's another person who could go ahead and get traded. So the quarterback need, and as far as supply and the demand, is just not what it would normally be in normal draft classes.
All right, should we move on to wide receivers? Huge wide receiver class, obviously. I got Henry Ruggs as the first wide receiver drafted. I took this at plus 200. This was again like 2 weeks ago. I don't really like that anymore at all.
No,
I think
that's still good at plus 200. That's still good.
Yeah,
I think so.
He's plus 300 now on Bovada, which is I guess the more but
maybe it wasn't that good then.
I mean these odds are these odds are so different from site to site. Jerry Jeudy is the favorite on Bovada by a little bit over CeeDee Lamb. Jeudy is minus 105, or I guess actually Lamb's the favorite at minus 110. Judy's at minus 105. And then it's Ruggs at plus 300. And then Justin Jefferson is fourth at plus 6,600. Doesn't Denzel Mims have a lot of buzz too? Maybe not to go first, the first receiver taken, but I don't know.
Yeah, this is one that came down a ton. I mean, Ruggs, even if you go back 4 or 6 weeks ago, was 10-1, 8-1 to go first. You saw that Jeremiah tweet that came out that said he thought he could be. Then prices started to crash. I'd still. It's kind of a flavor of which team decides to take. I think you've heard from a lot of different sources that of basically how wide receiver draft boards are lined up is kind of a mix of those 3 guys. So it's just going to depend which team basically decides to pull the trigger on a wide receiver first. So whether it be the Jets, whether it be the Raiders, the Niners are right there. So at this point, I don't have, the numbers I think are right on most of the Lamb and Judy's over under 11.5, 12.5, Ruggs 13.5. I think those are all kind of right in range. Also, you could get a trade up from somebody in the late teens that wants to grab their wide receiver 1. So I don't think there's a ton of actionable plays there now, unless you got in, a chunk of time ago. I know a lot of people liked over 5.5 wide receivers in the first round, but that's another one that's, it was, minus 110, a little bit of plus money even 4 or 6 weeks ago. Now minus 200, minus 250 at a lot of places. So at any point there, you're getting now where you're within a week of the draft where you're almost at the point of either you've got to be actionable on current information, like the Wills information we'll talk about here in a minute when we get to offensive linemen, or you've got to fade a little bit of the moves that have gone too far. Like I've seen over 5.5 wide receivers getting up there to, minus 250, some places minus 300. At this point, even though I think 6 is likelier than 5, if I can get a 2-1 or a 250-1 on under 5.5, then that's something I might think about coming back in because it's such a loaded wide receiver draft, as you said, that some teams might, after the first 3 or 4 go, might wait until the second or third round to grab a receiver because the difference between, guys 5 and 10 isn't as great as in a lot of years. So
Denzel Mims over under draft position is 32.5. If we're thinking, do you think he'll be a first rounder?
The opinions on him are so divergent.
Yeah.
Greg Cosell had him like as a top 15 player on tape, but Lance Zierlein is like insistent that, and Lance Zierlein's in Houston, Baylor's in Texas. He's insistent that Denzel Mims is not going in the first round. Gil Brandt had him at number 49 overall. I love Denzel Mims, but I feel like the opinions are just all over the place. I could see him going to the Vikings at 22. I could see him going like where Kenny Galladay went, which I think was around somewhere in the 40s. He reminds me a lot of Kenny Galladay.
That's a great comp for him. I agree.
Yeah. So he's just, man, he's a tough one, man. He's really a tough one. I tend to believe that Lance and Gil Brandt are on the right side of this, though, and that he's going to go in the second round.
All right, let me ask a real kind of simpler question. I'll throw this to you, Scott. Jesse Friedland on YouTube asks, for Burrow, Chase Young, and Okuda to go 1, 2, 3 is plus 140. Do you think that's the way that the top 3 picks would play out? Like those seem to be like the 3 most coveted players in this draft, just from what I've read as like a super amateur.
Yeah, I think you can go ahead and put Burrow and Chase Young down, and that's just chalk. Getting to 3, and I know. Look, I know when you look at a lot of the mock drafts, Jeffrey Okudah is the guy that has been signaled there to the Lions a lot. But I think if you're going to be a bit contrarian, you can probably find a little bit better odds, especially when you look at the Detroit. Just look at their roster and tell me who the hell they have at defensive tackle. And I think a lot of people, and Evan mentioned it, on his show over at Establish the Run with Adam yesterday. And I think when you look at Derek Brown, especially if you're looking to lay down a prop bet, I think Derek Brown at number 3 may be the better play. And I think he's a guy that could actually surprise a lot of people and go higher than what people are ranking him.
You know what's going to suck, Scott, is when we peg it and the Lions take Derek Brown, but it's after they trade down to number 6.
Yeah, I mean, it's possible, but if they're trading down, that means Okudah's not going to be the pick there at 3. That it's probably going to be a quarterback that somebody's trading up, possibly Isaiah Simmons.
Jeff Okudah to the Lions is like massive groupthink. Like
absolutely.
Okudah to the Lions in your mock draft, like this is the worst mock draft ever. Like, of course Okudah's going to the Lions. Like I think I'm probably at the end of the day going to have Okudah to the Lions, but man, I think that there are some bets where you can fade that groupthink, and I think that Scott nailed that one. Yeah.
No, absolutely. We talked about it pre-show, Scott's mock draft, having Brown in there. The fact that all the Okudah stuff isn't based on, it's kind of based on exactly what you said, groupthink. The Lions don't leak, and they're like the CIA. They run the shop like the Patriots. They don't have leaks. They're not like the Chargers where they put up a bunch of BS. They're not like the Giants where Gettleman, you tells a lot of the truth and all the stuff leaks out there like it is in New York. They keep it radio silent. So Okudah is basically just kind of an assumption between a lot of people that, he fits a need and he's a high player on the board. So that is by no means a lock. We talked about it pre-show. If you can get Derek Brown right now to go 3rd at 10-1 or higher at a lot of places, and you can get a trifecta. Yeah, and if you shop around. Oh, go ahead.
Plus 1,800 is what I got him at like a week ago.
Yeah, no, that's it. And I got a Burrow, Young, Brown trifecta 40-1 the other day. That's still at 15-1, 20-1, 25-1 a lot of places. That is absolutely worth throwing some pocket change on, depending on what size better you are, but 25, 50, $100, that I can kind of cash a lotto ticket there. Cause that's, if the Lions can't, everybody always wants to trade down, but in a lot of cases, if there's not the demand, they're going to hold the pick. And I put it at a coin flip between Okudah or Brown of who they're actually going to take.
Yeah, I think the other thing you really have to look at is on the back end of this first round, early second round, there's still a lot of cornerbacks that are going to be available. And look, we talked about tackle a little bit on the offensive tackle side, trying to find a consensus as far as the order that the tackles are going to go. It's just as hard at the defensive back position at the end of the first round, trying to figure out who's going to go. And if Detroit's looking to build up that defense, they could fill 2 needs, but you're not going to find a guy like Derek Brown in the second round, whereas you can probably find a little bit lesser of a guy and not have as big of a drop off if you passed up on Okudah and got a cornerback in the second round for Detroit.
I think we should get into offensive line next. It seems like there's a lot of variance. Evan, in your latest mock drafts, I believe you posted early this morning, you have Jedrick Wills going as the first offensive lineman to the Giants at 4. He's plus 175 on the site that I'm looking at right now.
That's good.
Makai
to
Becton.
be the first lineman drafted.
Yep.
I
Can I go ahead and go ahead and place that.
Yeah, I think so.
And Andrew Thomas, who you also have pretty high, is plus 700 to go as the first offensive lineman. Tristan Wirfs is the favorite at minus 125. Makai Becton, if I'm saying that right, is plus 175.
No, I think that right now is Wills.
Wills?
I really do. At plus 175, that's pretty good.
Yeah.
No, that was the banger of the last 48 hours. Was basically you had the Jordan, I think his last name's Rayhan, the Giants
Jordan
beat
Renan,
writer. Yep, who kind of broke that. He had heard from Willis. Then you had Jeremiah follow that up in the call and say that. And you've got Joe Judge on staff. You've got the old Alabama running back coach on staff. It's Gettleman. They know they're comfortable with them in a draft where you're not going to have a ton of actual interview time with guys and be able. So I think that was the banger of the last couple of days was, Wills a few days ago was plus 400, plus everybody was kind of assuming worse. But the quality leaks the last 2 days have been all Wills. I think that's legit. So yeah, at any plus money, I would roll. I think that is kind of locked in, even if the Giants trade down a few spots. If you get him for, first lineman off the board or 2 New York Giants, you can still get that at plus money at a lot of places. I think that's still a bet.
And I think it makes sense from a football standpoint too. I'll get right to you, Scott. But Jedrick Wills was a right tackle only at Alabama. That is the big need on the Giants line right now. But a lot of people in the NFL feel that Jedrick Wills has the skill set to eventually play left tackle and potentially move over there and replace Nate Solder, who is kind of nearing the end of the line. So he would play right tackle initially, and he would just be an immediate fit because that's where he played in college. And then they could cross train him when we get a full off season, when the world rebounds and we can get a full off season, they can cross train him and move him to left tackle eventually.
Yeah, I think another thing to key in on is Peter Schrager's really tuned in, and in his original mock drafts, he's been on Jedrick Wills to the Giants, since the beginning. So I think when you start looking at a guy like him who's keyed in, you start looking at some of the rankings. I know Dane Brugler has Jedrick Wills as number 5 overall prospect and the top offensive tackle on his board as well. So I think Jedrick Wills, you talk about the Judge and Saban connection. I think he's maybe the guy that makes the most sense there for the Giants right now at 4.
We could do running back. I feel like it's kind of obvious what's going to happen here, but maybe you guys disagree. DeAndre Swift is a clear favorite to be the first running back selected. At minus 250, Jonathan Taylor's at plus 270, J.K. Dobbins at plus 500. But then again, you look at over-under draft position, Swift is at 32.5, Taylor's at 37.5. So maybe there's not that big of a gap. But do you guys agree that Swift will be the first off the board?
I think this is a fade one. And I tweeted it a few days ago. Evan tweeted it the other day. You saw Lance Zierlein tweet out that he had thought, sneaky, that Clyde Edwards-Helaire could sneak in the first. This is one that you gotta sprinkle if you haven't done yet, because those prices are still out there. That Edwards-Helaire 10-1 or higher is at a lot of places. There's still a couple of sites at 33-1 I saw today, 20-1. I don't think there's a marketable difference in skill. Obviously, Swift is the more explosive player. But if you get into a lot of these, running back rankings, you look, Bob McGinn, I believe, had CEH 3rd over. So to me, the margins are once you get past out of that, first 10 or 15 picks and you get into the late first, early second round, you're really going to get a flavor of kind of what teams want to pick. So if you're getting a guy where I don't think there's much margin between the top 3-4 backs, and you can get that at 20-1, 30-1, that is an absolute must bet. That's still out there. And I know a couple of us liked it, and I've played it at a few shops. It's still a good price a lot around because I think that's a legit possibility to happen.
Any other hot takes on the running back position? I guess Edwards-Helaire is plus 1,500 right now on Bovada. And Swift again, minus 250. Taylor plus 200.
Betting Swift at minus 250 is like the biggest donkey move I've ever heard.
Yeah.
And I like Swift. He's my favorite running back in the draft, but this is like a stupid bet.
Over under running backs in the first round. I guess it's a 0.5.
Yeah, I mean, if you're still getting that at plus odds, I think you take it. I think you take it, right? I mean, what do you think, Joey?
Yeah, It's tough because if it's going to happen, it's going to be, in that last 5 pick range there where somebody maybe sneaks up. I didn't actually, I know there was like if you wanted to lay big chalk, there was under 1.5, like -400, -500. That I would feel more comfortable about that. At most, you'd see one. I didn't play it either way on the half. I know one of our boys, Connor Allen, really liked under a half at like +200. So I don't mind that as a sprinkle, thinking that, if you can get that kind of price, that none are taken. Just for me, I think there's, it's about a coin flip in those last 5-6 picks that you see somebody grab a backer now, whether it be CEH or Swift. So I don't mind taking a sprinkle if it's, 2 to 1, 2.5 to 1, but outside of that, I don't know. I don't really have a position on it.
Yeah, on Bovada now, under 1.5 is -1,000, over 1.5 running backs in the first round.
Yeah, I wouldn't lay -1,000 when it was back around, the -400. I'd be okay with it. I wouldn't want to ruin your whole draft portfolio if people get crazy and grab 2 backs late.
Right.
I guess we get Scott. Like when you're doing mock, like I have not done a mock draft yet that had a running back in the first round. Like I have not done a single. Have you?
Early on, I kind of sprinkled Swift in there on that late end, but I mean, if it's going to happen to me at all, which I don't see a running back going there early, because look, we're talking about draft. Look, running back position's deep in this draft. There's some late round guys that a lot of people like, and the position is just devalued. If there's going to be an outside chance of happening, it's going to be from, either the last 2 teams, San Francisco or Kansas City, trading out and the team to move up. But even if you look back a couple of years ago, like Nick Chubb was a guy, teams still waited to be at that top of the second round. So I think a lot of teams are going to go ahead and bypass their running back position in the first round. And you'll see those moves made, after day one has been complete. And some team will move up into position probably in the top of the second round to get a running back that they want.
I would love if some donkey team just traded up into the back of the first round to get a running back, traded up for a running back in the first round. I want to see analytics Twitter, what happens, and who would even do that? Like the Bears?
The Bears have a whole host of problems right now, and running back's the least of it.
We can move to tight end. Cole Kmet to be the first tight end taken is at -400. I guess everyone thinks that a given. His over/under average draft position is 44.5. Are there any values at tight end? Adam Troutman is +500 to be the first tight end taken, and he's the closest to Kmet. There's Bryson Hopkins is +600, and then it's all pretty crazy odds from there.
That number on Cole Kmet is insane.
Yeah.
No,
I agree with that. That's worse than the Swift number to me, because you're getting even farther down the line. And in a class that I took some Kmet over 44.5. I don't think there's a tight end in this draft. And you look at, some of the reports from guys you respect that have any more than like a mid-second round grade on any. Most of the guys are third round grades or worse. And then you're getting into complete. This is the position to take a lotto ticket on. So I've sprinkled a couple of different tight ends. I saw Scraggs had Harrison Bryant in one of his early mocks to the Patriots.
Yep.
And even though, is he going to go in the first? Likely not. But could he be the first tight end off the boards? Yes. He was 10 to 1 or higher. Albert O from Mizzou, doesn't have a lot of great tape in the blocking in that, but he ran a 4.49. Does somebody take an early shot on him just, because of the
Gil Brandt had Albert O 39th overall.
And then he's 15 to 1, 20 to 1 at a lot of places. So tight end is the place where I've sprinkled 3 or 4 guys that have been 10 to 1 or higher. I don't buy the Troutman either as TE2. FCS guy, doesn't block a lot. That to me doesn't really equate to what I've seen as a profile before as a guy that goes, in the second round. So this is a position, absolutely don't lay the chalk on Kmet and take probably 3 or 4 flyers, split a unit up, quarter unit on each guy between, the next 4 long shots.
Yeah, I think bet Albert O and maybe even Harrison Bryant.
Yep.
So what I'm showing is Albert O at +1100. This is to be the first tight end taken, and then Bryant at +1300. What I found funny is Thaddeus Moss is +800 to be the first tight end taken. So you need any more evidence that like this is all for fish, like
Yeah, right.
You know,
Is that-
He's got, he had the big national championship game. He's got the name recognition. He's got the
Exactly.
program recognition.
Right.
But you look at any of the, Brant or any of those, all of them have him outside the top 100. And it's
Yeah.
not even in a guy that's like around like 3 consideration.
But the
And
interesting thing with
Scott's a LSU dude. What do you think about Thaddeus Moss?
Look, I absolutely don't think Moss is even in the top 5 of tight ends. He's
Yeah,
undersized,
right.
he's slow, and it was easy to eat in that LSU offense with Justin Jefferson and all these other Jamar Chase, all these other guys doing what they're doing. The interesting thing about Thaddeus Moss, though, is if you start looking at the NFL virtual draft, his name was the list of 58 players that were invited for the virtual draft. So it's a little bit of a signal to go ahead and maybe take a long shot on Thaddeus Moss and maybe bet a unit here just to say, screw it, I'm gonna go ahead and do it. But that's just one of the interesting nuggets that I found, was that they would even include him in the virtual draft for the NFL.
Well, it's just like his
And
dad's
that poor kid's gonna be waiting a long time.
I think it's just because like his dad's gonna be part of the broadcast. They probably have like
No,
some.
but that does bring up a good point, that looking at that list of 58, I mean, historically, like the players that have been invited to the draft, and this is sort of our equivalent. I mean, those dudes go early. So, I mean, it's not a bad idea to just, scope out the 58 and see like, oh, well, this dude is, make a bet on this guy.
All right. There are a bunch of props on the site that I look at that's like, and maybe these are a little too, would be the word, like convoluted or like cumbersome to talk about in this format, but like Big Ten, will there be more Big Ten players drafted in the first round than Alabama players? And Big Ten is minus 225 in that, and Alabama is plus 165.
There's one of those I'll touch on that a guy loaded up on last night, and that was when the Clemson, the AJ Terrell, basically the reports came out. You saw Dane Brugler with it. There was a lot of concurrence that he's going to be a first-round pick. So Clemson's over/under has been 1.5, and Clemson versus Ohio State was plus 0.5. So those are ones that I laid some chalk on the last 2 days. It's kind of run up there now, but if you can lay, minus 200, minus 300 on Clemson over 1.5, or Clemson plus 0.5 versus Ohio State, because Simmons is in the first round, and now with AJ Terrell getting all the buzz that he could be a mid-first round guy, that pretty much assures them they're going to have 2 first-round picks. So that's one that's probably going to steam up here even further before we get to draft day. But I would feel comfortable laying the Clemson over 1.5 or the plus 0.5 versus Ohio State, since they're both likely to have 2 guys in the first round at anywhere up to minus 300, minus 350, or any of that. So of those, that's one that's information's leaked out recently that I like a lot.
I see Clemson and Oklahoma pitted together, and they're both minus 115. Which school would have more players drafted? I don't know. It's hard to come up with a quick opinion on these things because there's so many moving parts to it. I know, but
yeah, and that's one. That's probably a wash because it's probably 2-2. But that's when, if you feel like Kenneth Murray, who has a little bit of a wide range of outcomes, probably sneaks into the first round in the 20s, but isn't a guy that had as much buzz beforehand. That's one I don't mind taking. The late buzz is more on Terrell, so I would take in a pick there. It probably pushes, but that's another one I'd lean Clemson.
What else do we got? We can get into the first safety drafted. Xavier McKinney is a heavy favorite at minus 275. Grant Delpit is plus 250, and the rest are real long shots. I don't know if either of you guys have opinions on that.
Scott, what do you got? Do you got McKinney first off the board in your mock going down there?
Yeah, McKinney's the guy that I have first as far as the safety. As far as Grant Delpit goes, look, I'm an LSU alum down here in Louisiana. I watch plenty of Grant Delpit. He played much better in 2018 than he did in 2019. But if you look at these scouts, especially, Bob McGinn and his series, these scouts do not like the way he takes angles and how many tackles he missed. I think they counted like 16 missed tackles in 5 games. I definitely saw that on the field this year. I don't think Delpit's going to go in the first round. And you start looking at Xavier McKinney, and I think he's just a heavy favorite to be the first safety off the board. The coaches, he checks a lot of boxes that the coaches love. Nick Saban Saban's gloated about the kid, and I think he's just versatile enough to where he's not scheme dependent for a lot of these defenses.
Don Drew, we talked about running back not laying the chalk on Swift because there was some variance. We talked about tight end absolutely not laying the chalk on Kmet. This is the position where if you were going to lay chalk on a guy on a position to go first, that McKinney is the strong favorite here. Where the other positions wouldn't be a surprise at all if Kmet and Swift weren't the first. This would be pretty much of a shock if it wasn't McKinney. He likely goes 15 to 20 spots higher potentially than any other safety in the class, as he could be, a mid to, teens to 20s guy. And it's probably unlikely you see another safety in the first round, if not for another, 20 to 25 picks.
Some questions from the chat, more LSU or Alabama players in the first round. I would think LSU is a heavy favorite for that, right? Or no. I mean, the opposite. Alabama would be a heavy.
Yeah, Alabama's. This one is tough though, because some of a lot depends on what some of the later 20s happens with some of the fringe guys. Is Trevon Diggs a first round player? And that you get into that. Is Patrick McQueen going to lock himself into a first round? So that was one I stayed away from because both of them have 4 or 5 guys that are likely to go in the first. And so when you get into that last few picks, you really start to throw in a lot of variance. That to me, that one's just not worth staying away from. When you're centered down like the Clemson and the Ohio State, where it's basically 2 guys and you can really center in on where they're going to go, that to me is a lot more actionable than when you get to those comparisons where it's 4 or 5 guys, because in the last 10 picks, so much variance can happen that I would stay away from that one.
I feel you. I don't know. I could just run through all the props that I've left. It's unfortunately the site that I look at. It's a lot of that, pitting one school against another. Auburn versus Georgia, Clemson.
Yeah,
versus Oklahoma.
that's not fun. That's not.
Let
fun.
me ask you guys: with offensive line, the report came out about Becton. Give me your one. So we've all got Wills going off first to the Giants. Then give me your next 2, 3, 4 tackles of kind of how they fall in order, who they're going to go to, and does Becton fall to OT4? Does he fall to OT5? Do you think that even matters?
Well, on Becton specifically, I really like putting him to the Bucks in my mock draft, because I think he could just fall there. Number one. Number two, there have been reports of the Bucks actually wanting to trade up for an offensive tackle. I mean, they're in a really small window with Tom Brady, and it makes all the sense in the world for them to be aggressive and all in. And then, due to that report, I think that, he could potentially fall to number 14. So I really like that match right now. One thing I wanted to mention is that on Bovada, you can bet on first round picks, like the Chargers to take an offensive or a defensive player. And on so many of the teams, it's juiced with way too much confidence. Like the Cowboys are minus 300 to take a defensive player and plus 275 to take an offensive player. And I'm like, there's no way it should be juiced that much. We don't know. We don't know a lot this year. I know my mock draft is going to suck this year. But I do know that I can, kind of capitalize on what I don't know, and that's way too much confidence to have that the Cowboys are going to take a defensive player. They could easily take Cesar Ruiz out of Michigan to replace Travis Frederick. They could take, I think they could take another receiver. I don't think that's crazy. They only have 2 good receivers right now. They could, there are different ways that they can go. They have not signed Dak to a long-term deal yet. There are a lot of different ways that they can go, and to pretend that they're just that there's a 33% chance essentially that they take an offensive player. It should start at 50-50 and then work down a little bit. It should definitely be 60-40. So I think that, you're getting some, you're getting some equity there.
No, I agree. Let me tee that up for the people that are watching it as kind of the strategy there. Evan and I talked about it last night, is when you've got offense, defense, and you've got a real perception in a lot of the mocks that, a certain team's going to go, they're either going to go, wide receiver or that. And so they get juiced, minus 250, minus 300, and you can get 2-1, 250, 2.5-1, 3-1 on the other side. In the back half of the first, if you take the teams between, 15 and 32, and you just play the opposite side of the chalk and take, the 4 or 5 teams that are 2-1, 3-1, to take, the opposite side, offense, defense, I really think that's a plus EV strategy that you're going to come out profit, because like you said, once you get past the first couple of picks, or especially the first 8 or 10 guys, all of the certainty around, that top half crop goes away. And you just have teams there, in the back end of the first round that are taking, what would be best player available, number 1 guy on their board. They're not, teams aren't as locked into, oh, I'm going to take an offensive guy, I'm going to take a receiver X. Unless you're making a move up for one guy, you're in a lot of cases taking the number 1 guy that's left on your board that fits, regardless of what side of the ball it is. So those are ones that are often mispriced. And as we get towards a good opportunity where a lot of draft bets the market's been crushed, you missed a lot of lines. Those are ones that are still playable in a lot of places. If you just basically 2-1 or higher, go ahead and take it, split a unit or 2 up, and just bet them all.
Yeah, man, I think especially when you start looking at the Cowboys right there, and Evan hit on it, and look, Cesar Ruiz is a guy that the scouts love. You look at last year, Minnesota drafted a center, Bradbury. I think he went like 18, and you're talking about Cesar Ruiz being a 20-year-old center that is just a mauler. He's versatile enough. He can play either guard spot. What is the Cowboys' identity? Their identity has been that offensive line, pounding Zeke. You don't have a contract right now with Dak Prescott. I think it's a very strong chance that Cesar Ruiz could jump up that high, because the scouts do seem to hold him in higher esteem than what Bradbury was last year for the Vikings. And I think that's a good bet right there to throw a couple units on the Cowboys drafting offense at plus 275. Look, they got to do something to get Dak Prescott happy. He's talking about him and his family can't eat off of $35 million a year. So I think Cesar Ruiz is an outside chance as a dark horse sleeper to go ahead and be the pick right there.
No, and let's touch on one also that kind of aligns with what we're talking about here. We're all aligned with that, offensive line over 5.5 in the first round. Some places moved to 6.5. I saw 5 Dimes still had over 5.5, minus 425. I would still lay that. I think that should be minus. I think you're going to see potentially 6 linemen in the top 20, much less, the first round, where I think you could see upwards of 7. Probably at least 5 tackles, maybe 6 tackles.
I had 8 in the mock that I did last night. 8.
There you go. So that's one that if you can still catch a 5.5, even if it's juiced minus 400, minus 500, I would still lay it. I laid minus 200, minus 250, minus 350. I would still lay it up to minus 500 if you can find a 5.5. Because like you said, I think 7 or 8 is much likelier than 5.
So I got to refill my drink. But there were questions in the chat about Isaiah Simmons, who we didn't really touch on, I don't think. His over-under is 6.5, and it's actually fairly even on the over/under. What do you guys think about him? And I'm gone.
I'm on the over for him because I just don't think the Giants are in play to take him at this point. And I did early in the process. I think the first mock draft that I did, I had Isaiah Simmons going to the Giants, and I don't think that that's going to happen. I think it's just real. I think it's almost a certainty, and there are very few certainties. So I'm probably going to look like an idiot on Thursday, but there are very few certainties in this draft. But I think that almost a certainty that the Giants take a tackle, and then it's like, I think the Dolphins are going to take a quarterback at 5. If they don't do that, I think they'll take an offensive tackle. I think they're certainly not going to take Isaiah Simmons. I think the Chargers are dangerous, and they could take Isaiah Simmons. Scott talked about that earlier. But, if you just escape from the Chargers, then, you're gold.
You're really betting on one team. Unless there's, some trade and mover, right. You're basically betting that 6.5 is basically, do the Chargers take them or not? Because 1 through 5, there's really not. And the closer we get here, it doesn't appear any scenarios where he's going to go into the top 5.
Yeah, I think, I think when you're trying to lay money on a bet, and you're betting, you're pushing all your chips in the middle on that one option being San Diego. It does, I mean, excuse me, the LA Chargers now. It just doesn't make any sense to push your money towards that one team because it's just too up in the air as to what's going to happen whenever you have a lot of options after you get to that sixth position.
Yeah, I agree. There's some, some over 6.5 play. If you can find a 5.5, Vegas, these weren't available offshore, but I know Vegas had 5s and 5.5s. That to me is, I laid a bunch on over 5.5. I'm just not seeing the scenarios that come into play where he can go in the top 5.
I think he could fall into the teens, actually. When I was doing my mock last night, I wound up giving him to the Panthers at 7, essentially like Luke Kuechly's replacement. And I think he would make a lot of sense there, but if he doesn't go there, I really think that, you start to get into wide receiver territory, Tua territory. And I think he could fall a little bit. I mean, at the end of the day, like, I love Isaiah Simmons. Don't get me wrong. His skill set is nasty, but I mean, the position that he played most last year was slot corner. I mean, that is insane for a guy who runs sub 4.4 at like 238. He's playing freaking slot corner. But he's still an off-ball linebacker. He's not like a dynamic edge rusher. He doesn't really necessarily have a trump card. He has he's a really good football player. But I mean, I still think like he could, fall into the teens even,
Yeah, I think when you
go ahead.
I think when you start looking at Isaiah Simmons, you have to figure out what his fit is. And that's one of the things that you've heard a lot throughout the pre-draft process is, while he's super athletic, very talented, where does he fit within a defensive scheme? What coach is gonna feel comfortable taking Isaiah Simmons, maybe bypassing a need, some of these teams that need offensive tackle, you start talking about the Cardinals and some of these other teams. I think once you get there and you sit there and see him maybe go past Carolina, because let's face it, he doesn't have the same skill set as what Luke Kuechly did. So where is he going to fit? How is he going to fit in some of these offenses and defenses? And I think you really need to start looking at the defensive schemes that some of these teams run to see if he's going to go ahead and fit there.
There are a lot of questions in the chat about what the Panthers will do with their first pick. A couple guys asking, is it worth taking Panthers first pick as defense at -250? One other guy said he saw it at -200. That's a lot of juice. But do you think that's a lock that they'll go defense?
I don't think I think this is one that I had mentioned before, that I think if there's a team in the top 10 that's most likely to trade down, this is the spot. Because this is a team that's new regime. They need a lot of talent. They're going through a lot of roster turnover. It's going to be an attractive pick for teams that either want to get their OT one or wide receiver one. So a team could, between 8 and 14 could slide up. So I wouldn't lay, if they hold the pick, would I lean that it's defense? Yes. But would I lay -200 or -250 that it's defense? No. Because you're working under the assumption there that there's like a defensive player that they love that fits right there. Derek Brown drops there. Do they probably take him? Yes. But again, I wouldn't lay it because I think this is one that is a position that a lot of teams are going to want to trade up and get in front of the tackle run that's going to happen at 8, 9, 10 potentially. So yeah, no, I would stay away from laying that chalk and probably give that one a full pass.
I think it's likely and logical that the Panthers take a defensive player at number 7, but yeah, you're right. They could trade down. They could also take an offensive lineman.
Yeah.
So it's just you're not getting enough return at -250, I don't think.
My friend Phil wants me to talk about the Vikings, and then there's a question in the chat about them trading up for Henderson. I don't know who Henderson is, but so we can move on.
No. CJ Henderson.
Let's go.
We should actually
CJ
talk
Henderson's
about
a guy who's
him.
caught a ton of buzz. So let me see what you guys think of kind of where he can land. I'm under 16.5. Henderson is one of my bigger positions of the last week or so that I've loaded up on.
That's great, dude. What'd you get that at? Do you remember?
It started out, before, right when the news started dropping, I was able to get in at some -120. Then I added some -140. Then I added some -160. And as that started going down, now is 13.5 or 12.5 a lot of places. But I think he's one that could even pop into the top 10 at Jacksonville at 9 if they hold the pick.
Yes.
As kind of somebody that I don't see any scenario where he gets past the Falcons at 16. Do you?
No, I think teams love this dude. I don't know. I guess, like, I don't think it gets past 17 to the Cowboys. I'll say that.
Okay.
But yeah, he could go at 7 to the Panthers. He could go shoot. I mean, why would he? You know, he could go 8 to the Cardinals. I mean, they badly need a number 2 cornerback. You know, number 9 to the Jags, absolutely. I mean, you Raiders at number 12. Tony Pauline believes they're very much in play to take C.J. Henderson at 12. It's not a very good cornerback class, I don't think. And I think the teams see him as an elite talent who maybe underachieved a little bit at Florida, but they love his twitch and, you know, his game all around. I remember Stephon Gilmore was kind of like that coming out of South Carolina. He gave up a lot of production at South Carolina, but teams were right about him. He wound up going early in the draft, and he's become, you know, like the best corner in the league.
Yeah, that's one where it's kind of basically what you've gotten information wise over the past week to 10 days is that this is a 2 cornerback tier and then a fall off. So I think you said there's a ton of teams between, you know, 7 and 16 that could use corner help. And everybody knows that CB3 is a big drop from Okudah and Henderson. So I think that if you can catch even at minus 150, minus 200, if you can catch a 16.5 under on Henderson, I would scoop it up.
I guess while we're on cornerbacks, a question from Ryan Abramowitz in the chat. Thoughts on Gladney? I bet that's Jeff Gladney at over 32.5. It's minus 120.
Yeah, Lance Zierlein recently mentioned that there's concerns over Jeff Gladney's foot. You know, what it's at minus what?
Minus 120.
That's not bad. Yeah,
for
I think you take the over on that. I mean, I think he's a really good player, but any medical concern is going to really hurt in a year where team physicians cannot, you know, put the players through, hardcore medical testing.
I got questions about my Blues jersey in the background. If it's a Marco Scandella one, these are like rally towels that they give out at the playoff games. So we got Jake Allen, David Backus, Robbie Fabry, and Paul Stasny, some old ones. Anyway, let's move on.
Paul Stasny, son of Jan, who was in my class in high school.
That's right. Yep.
Father of Jan.
Yeah. What?
There's a great fight video of Ben Bishop, who is now he went to our high school too. Ben Bishop.
The Stars, Dallas Stars. Yeah.
Okay, yeah, the Dallas Stars. It's a goalie versus goalie fight where they're both at the opposite ends of the the ring or the rink. Is it the rink? I don't know.
It would be like an ice rink, yeah.
Yeah, the ice rink. And they drop their gloves and they meet in the middle. And it's a badass fight. I mean, it's like a legit.
This is in like semi-pro when he was like 19 years old. It's great. And the announcer is incredible. You can find it on YouTube. Live from the Deja Blue Arena. Get him, Betty, get him. It's great.
It is. It's an incredible video.
Thoughts on AJ Epinesa? We haven't talked about some of these guys. His over-under draft position ranges between 29 to 31, depending on the book. I'll find out what Bovada's at.
A lot of mocks had him like mid-20s early, and then the latest buzz, I think that was another one what we've touched on with a little bit of the groupthink where everybody was mocking him in the I-20, and that wasn't really based off anything. I wouldn't be surprised. I took last night, actually, like a plus 200, he would fall out of the first round. Just because I had seen Zerline thought he was going out of the first round, and I haven't caught enough love from actual outside of just people mocking him there that I think he kind of reminds me of a more of a rotational D lineman than a guy who's going to come in and be an impact player. So it's a thin D line class, so maybe someone scoops him, but I wouldn't be shocked to see him fall into round 2. And if you can catch like a plus 200 or better or something like that on him falling out, then yeah, I would scoop that.
Easy money.
Yeah, I feel like
he had a bad combine.
yeah, I feel like that's a money bet. For some reason,
Yeah.
a lot of these mock drafts that have been going on have just not caught on to Epinesa, like, being outside of that first round. Look, the buzz from the scouts is that he just doesn't have any elite trait that would allow him to be worthy of a first round caliber pick. And I think when you start looking at teams, he's just not. You look at a guy like Cam Jordan who went on that back end, that back 10 type of run, and Cam Jordan's just got way different talent level and more elite traits as far as a defensive tackle that's not necessarily that speed edge rusher. I just don't see Epinesa having enough of those traits to jump in or even sneak into the first round. So for me, I think Epinesa, if you can get a plus 200 for him being outside the top 32, that just seems like easy money.
Yeah, there's also a head-to-head of Espinosa and Gross Matos, who goes first, and Gross Matos minus 145 to go ahead of Espinosa. I like that as well. That's on Bovada right now. I think that's worth a bet because Gross Matos is a guy who's got actually, the length and the skill and the talent to potentially be a productive guy in the NFL, where a lot of Espinosa, like you had just said, is much more average at best.
And he's also one of the guys that's had interviews there on the back couple picks of that draft with the 49ers, with the Chiefs. I think he's had interviews with the Seahawks and even the Titans. So that's a guy, Gross Matos, who's interviewing with a lot of those teams right there in the last 5 or 6 picks of the first round.
Look at my boy Scott Smith up on the interviews. I think the Patriots are kind of dangerous for Epinesa because he just kind of like seems, and also the Titans actually. He just kind of fit, seems like that sort of, the culture sort of player. Like he's just going to be a good player, and I think a lot of teams are going to be like trying to hit singles and doubles this year as opposed to swinging for the fences, just trying to get good football players. But I'm with you. I don't think he's a first round player. Like I don't think he belongs in the first round.
Yeah.
I think really good year for the draft. And I think that AJ Epinesa is like a mid to late second rounder.
I'm going back to quarterback for a second. Jacob Eason over under 47.5. And then there's also a head-to-head on Bovada between Eason and Fromm. And Fromm's kind of a heavy favorite in that, but just your guys' thought on Eason since we didn't really discuss them when we talked about quarterbacks.
I would just take in a head-to-head like that, because it's so up in the air, I would just take whatever you get the better odds on. If you're going to bet that, like there's nothing substantive to.
I don't think Fromm's very good. Just having like watched a lot of Georgia football.
Right. I mean, we can debate their skill sets all we want. It doesn't matter. Just I think if you're betting that, you just take whatever you get better odds on.
No, I agree. This is one that there were some places that laid like some Fromm numbers in the 40s early. I went heavy on those and smashed overs. And this is even you look at some of the scouting stuff, but even just I don't think he's any good. He doesn't have any plus physical traits. I mean, his ceiling is probably a career backup, an emergency backup situation. So is that the type of guy you're going to take in the first 2 rounds? That has you almost no potential. That I wouldn't be surprised if he fell 3rd, 4th round, even maybe a little later. Just a guy that has no ceiling. So that's one. Eason, he's got the electric arm. I think he had a nice combine, showing his potential. I would if you got a head-to-head there and a decent price, I would go ahead and bet Eason. I wouldn't touch the over/under though. I think he goes ahead of Fromm because somebody scoops up him for potential wise. But I don't know if that's the first 47 picks because Hurts is a guy. Obviously, we got Love on the back end of the first round of the second. Jalen Hurts with a lot of buzz. So then the next time somebody might be looking QB, could not be to the the late second or that. So I wouldn't touch an over/under on Eason there. But anything 50s on Fromm, I'd go over.
All right. I don't know. Anyone have anything else? I feel like I've run through all the stuff that I wanted to talk about and a lot of the YouTube.
Are there more questions in the YouTube chat?
Yeah, I mean Jeff we can go back to wide receiver. We might have already covered this, but Jeff Argabright, I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly, said with over 5.5 heavily juiced receivers to go in the first round, I believe that means, who will be the fifth and sixth receivers?
I think for me,
Right.
just looking at things,
Yeah.
we kind of hit on Denzel Mims, and Evan had some information that he doesn't think he'd go in there. But for me, I think with the injuries that you've seen to Ayuk having surgery, and some of these other guys, for me, I think the last two that would get in, if you're going to go ahead and bet six, it's going to be Jalen Reagor and it's going to be Denzel Mims.
So I think we can all agree that Judy, Ruggs, Lamb, Jefferson is
Yep.
very likely. I don't think he's a lock, but I think he's very likely.
Yep.
That's four. And then we're talking about Ayuk, who had the surgery, which really shouldn't be a big deal, but it's scary in a year like this. Mims, and then Reagor. Those guys are candidates to go in the first round. But I also want, like, what's the effect of this being a really deep wide receiver draft? Are teams, when they're on the clock, going to be like, you know what?
We'll wait.
Wait a little bit.
Yep.
And, we don't have to take Jalen Reagor in the first round because we can get KJ Hamler, 20 picks from now or something like that. So
That's what, because this, I mean, you've got
Right.
guys, you've got Chenault, you've got KJ
Yep.
Hamler, you've got Donovan Peoples-Jones,
T.
you've got Lynn
Higgins.
Bowden. I mean, you got T. Higgins, who, even though he didn't really have a great workout, obviously posted it. I mean, this class goes, a dozen guys deep, and that's what we spoke about earlier, where if you've got an under 5.5 at the gun, that's when I'd wait until draft day and see how far it can ride up. And then maybe come back on an under at 2-1 or better. Because like you said, it's just at the end of the first round, are you gonna, reach on your wide receiver 5 or 6, or you're gonna take another position or tackle or defensive line that's gonna thin out right after those top guys, or instead of being able to get, a wide receiver in the 3rd or the 4th, that might be better than Jalen Reagor or any of that. So that one, it's not a lot of delineation between wide receiver 5 and wide receiver 10 or 11.
I don't know if this prop is available anywhere, but I have a question for over under on how many XFL players will be drafted. I think it's a 1.5.
Well, we know Kenny Robinson. Kenny
Yeah.
Robinson is the one, right? Who would be the next guy? I don't,
because I mean, a lot of guys have signed with teams already, just like it didn't enter the draft.
Right, but we have to narrow it down to the draft eligible XFL players, which, I mean, I haven't made a list of those guys.
No, I haven't looked into that one too heavily either.
Maybe
Yeah, I know
it's
Kenny Robinson, but
0.5. Maybe it's 0.5 or I mean, I don't know. Maybe it's just Robinson only. There's also a
it's
question.
just XFL players to be drafted.
I don't see this prop anywhere. It's just a question.
Okay.
So I don't really know the exact details of that.
Yeah, I don't know how many XFL players are eligible for the draft. I haven't put any time into that.
All right. Ferris Mir on YouTube asks, Evan, you had Green Bay taking LB Murray in round 1 in your latest mock. Do you have real intel they are looking defense in round 1? Offense is heavy fave in most books.
No, I don't have any. And I was talking to Scott about this the other night. I don't have any good intel really on the back end of the draft. Things get really murky at the back end of the draft. I mean, you're really throwing darts and you're just trying to logically connect. I think that Kenneth Murray would be a good fit in Green Bay. I think that Christian Kirksey, who they signed to a pretty cheap deal, should not deter them from taking a guy like Kenneth Murray or Patrick Queen. They ask a lot of their linebacker in Green Bay. They really played like with one linebacker in Green Bay. It was Blake Martinez, who just got, stomped. And I mean, they just threw him out there to the wolves. It really wasn't even his fault. I think he's a better player than what he was given credit for in Green Bay. And I think he was actually a pretty good signing by the Giants. But, I think that Kenneth Murray and Patrick Queen are both better athletes than him and have way higher upsides than Christian Kirksey, who they signed to a 2-year, $13.5 million contract. And, linebacker has been a problem for them. And again, they ask a lot of their linebackers, so they have to be really, really toolsy and be really, really talented. I think that Kenneth Murray and Patrick Queen both kind of check that box.
Yeah, Packers is one everybody
drafted, 2 years ago, they drafted Oren Burks out of, I believe it was Wake Forest or Georgia Tech. And he just has been kind of injured, but that was the kind of linebacker that they're looking for. He was a crazy athlete. And that's what and I think that Kenneth Murray and Patrick Queen are both like, rich man's version of that. But go ahead, Joey.
No, it's just you were saying with the Packers, and that's when we've talked offense, defense, a lot of groupthink around, okay, the Packers are going to take a wide receiver. This is a team that's expended a lot of draft capital in the wide receiver position in recent years, and had a lot of misses. But it's one, are they going to go back to the well again? And people, again, it's not really, I don't think, based on a ton of good sources or information. It's just based on, oh, well, the Packers wide receiver core is underwhelming. We're going to pencil them into a wide receiver. And that's one where if you can catch a plus money, plus 150, plus 200 on Packers to go defense, again, I totally agree with you. Worth the play, even if it's not, linebacker, they've got holes on defense that it's by no means a lock end of the first round there. Those are the best ones to take because those last 5-10 picks, anything can happen because teams are scattering their board down of just who they can take, that's higher on their board at a certain position.
You're muted, Evan, for some reason.
Scott, what do you think of Xavier McKinney of Alabama? I just have not heard anything about him.
We talked a little bit about him when you were away, but yeah, let's get back into that.
Yeah.
Yeah, so the thing with Xavier McKinney, I think just the versatility and where he fits on defenses, he fits so many different teams. He's not scheme dependent. He's real good at blitzing. He's played, in the slot, covering slot. He's played on the back deep end, covering the back deep end, and then he's played, just a regular safety position. He's even come up and played some linebacker. Xavier McKinney goes, he's easily going to be the first safety off the board because he fits so many different positions and versatility. And he's a guy that Nick Saban just loves, that he's just raved about, his talent and the buzz that I've heard from the scouts is that he could go at, as high as the 16, 17, 18 range and that, he could go, there in the mid 20s, but that's pretty much the range of where he's going. I think he could go as high as 18 to the Miami Dolphins. You look at what they lost there with Minkah Fitzpatrick last year, and how are they going to go ahead and fill that position with so many holes? And I think he's a guy that that can fit in that range. Or I think in one of your earlier mock drafts you had him there to Jacksonville to the Jaguars. I think that's a team that he could go ahead and fit on as well.
A guy in the chat.
I think he fits the Dallas at 17 as well. But I just have not heard a whole lot of buzz about him recently, and that concerns me a little bit. Like, he just has not been a hot player recently, I don't think. And he maybe just falls to the second round.
And I think that's the place where we really get in trouble this year because, one of the things that you've been specifically good at is reading between the lines from some of these beat reporters and kind of sifting through what's smoke and what's fire, trying to figure out what the rumors are, which ones are true and what's not. You've always been great at it, just digging through all the information. There's just not that information coming out this year, just with the coronavirus and everything that's going on and so many people being quarantined and not having draft rooms for some of these interns to duck in and go ahead and leak out information. So it's going to be a struggle to kind of nail down these last 7 or 8 picks and get a good handle on and feel confident on what some of these teams are thinking.
So I was going to leave this question until we're for our final question, but I don't know when you guys want to wrap it up. Maybe this will be our final question, depending on.
I can keep going. I don't have anything to do.
I guess that's true. Well, we originally planned to start this at 7, so technically we'd already be 2 hours of Joey and Scott's time. But I'll just throw this out there because a lot of people were asking about it. At the top of Bovada, the prop is, when will the NFL 2020 regular season start? On or before September 13th, which was the original start date, is plus 110, and then after September 13th is minus 150.
Man, I actually like the after September 13th. I think
Killing me, man.
Yeah.
I'm not making any money this year if there's no football season.
I just you start looking at it, and as much as these teams and owners bitch about practice time and trying to get things on schedule, they're already trying to do these virtual meetings where they could kind of get in the playbook and see some things. Look, these coaches and these GMs are fickle about when their team's going to be ready. You know, I think it's actually a heavier bet that we don't even see college football this year, because it's going to be just harder to go ahead and have a shortened season than what the NFL is. One thing I know is that the NFL is going to get their money one way or another this year, whether it's playing in empty stadiums or not. But will it be pushed back past September 13th? I think it's a strong bet that it will.
I write about baseball, so this is like in more my job depends on baseball happening. So this is in more my
Oh,
immediate.
you're getting the year off, Drew.
I don't want the
You're
year
off,
off,
bro.
man. I don't want the year off. And
How
I
about we just skip straight to playoff baseball?
they should get really creative with it and do like a round robin tournament.
Yeah, do like an NCAA tournament. You know?
But like even 2 weeks into this thing, I was like, I'm just done guessing what's gonna happen.
Mhm.
And I think if you're gonna place a wager on it, I think we've done a good job as a country of like this social distancing is working. But I think there's a big risk of once things get opened up again, and I think it might happen too soon, that there's going to be another wave. And I'm not rooting for that to happen.
Mhm.
You have to like preface that when you say it, because people like think you're like rooting for the disease or something. I don't think anyone's doing that, but I worry that might happen, and that might coincide with when the football season should have been starting, like right around August, September.
Yeah, I think the pro leagues have the money and the logistics, and if you do it with no fans, to be much more apt to make things happen. I agree with Scotty though. College, I don't see a lot of logistical ways to get college football actually happening with everything that happens there. So I'd be much more bullish on NFL taking place. Whether it starts on time or not, it's a different question. But I think we do have an NFL season, probably with no fans. College football wise, though. I would be much less optimistic.
All right, we've gone about an hour and a half. I say we call it. We could do this again. Like, I've got nothing going on. Let's do it again, like Tuesday night or something.
No, for sure, because it'll be, this last week is the week where all the info pops. So
Yeah.
give it a few days to marinate, see what hits out there, and run it back.
Wednesday. Now that we know how to do it, now that it took like 24 hours for us to figure out how to put it up. Wednesday night, if you guys got nothing going on.
For sure, for sure.
Yeah, I'm good Wednesday night, man. I'll be Tuesday night on Twitch with all the guys at the Action Network, kind of dropping some mock draft information. And Wednesday night will be my final mock draft. I'll be releasing that on the Action Network. We've got some timelines that both Evan and I have to get our drafts in to get graded, and I think Wednesday works perfect.
Let's do it, man.
I'm
7
beating you
o'clock.
this year, Scott. Man, you're going down, bro.
Look, I have very little hope for my accuracy this year with the way things have been
Me
going.
too. I'm hoping that I get like 7 player to team matches. I'll take it. I'll take 7.
Can we get a little wager? Who gets the better mock here between Evan and Scotty here? I mean,
Scott
put a little
takes me
action
down
on
every
it.
year.
Just for like a shot.
See, look, the last time Evan and I went out drinking, Evan picked up most of the tab, so I'm waiting for him to come down here to New Orleans so I could see if I could go ahead and keep him out of jail.
All right, we should end on that note. Thanks, guys. Thanks so much. That was
Absolutely good time, man. Talk to you guys.
Thanks.
All right, guys. Later.
awesome. Boys.